really want to take your questions. All right, and we are being live streamed. So we're going to kick this off now. Thank you all for joining us. And welcome, everyone. This is the third and final webinar in our Road to Mission Science series. This program is facilitated by the Lunar and Planetary Institute with both the inspiration and support from the ChemCam instrument on the Mars Curiosity rover. And this is a really exciting time in planetary science. NASA is sending spacecraft to objects all over the solar system, from Mercury all the way up to Pluto. So it's an exciting era to be joining this discipline. And today we're going to be talking with 4 planetary scientists, and we're going to hear all about their career paths and the recommendations and information that they have for students and early career scientists. And we'll share a variety of opportunities and other resources through our packet. So I want to remind everyone, this is a Zoom webinar. You can participate through the Q&A and through the chat. And this time in the Q&A, we're doing something new where you can view other participants' submitted questions. You'll be able to see what questions are being asked, and we ask that you vote on them. You can thumbs up if you want that question to be asked. So we're really going to try to get to the most popular questions. So if you use that feature, you'll help us out. Okay, so we're going to get to our speaker introductions in just a minute. We have a really awesome panel joining us. But first, we want to get a little bit of information about who we have joining us for the webinar today. So I have some poll questions, and we're going to start off with those real quick. So first off, there are 2 poll questions here, and these are just getting an idea of your academic level and your discipline. These are obviously not exhaustive. This doesn't capture everything. For the second option, you can click more than one, but just want to get an idea of who's with us today. So I'll give you a minute to answer these. About 10 more seconds. Okay, and I'm going to end the poll. Thank you for participating. We'll just quickly look at the results. We've got people from all different academic backgrounds, a lot of graduate and undergraduate students. Thank you so much for being here. And we've got people who have backgrounds in space science, earth science, but that's not it. Life sciences, computer and data, they're all represented. So thank you for being here. And I've got one more poll question for you. I say one more, it's actually a couple more, but they're fast. Okay, so again, just really quick, this helps us understand who we're serving and how we can better design programs to serve this audience. So if you'll take a minute, we have 3 questions here. Which of these experiences have you had on your path to research? If you're currently looking for opportunities, which kinds of opportunities are you seeking? And which factors are most important to you as you consider these opportunities? So I'm going to give you a minute to answer these. Thank you very much for your participation. All right, I'll close this up in about 10 more seconds. Okay, so 3, 2, 1. And we'll just look at these real quick. So I love to see this. We could see this, like, this is a nice spread. Lots of people have studied, conducted research, joined professional societies. These are all great steps to take. And we're building up to participating in missions. And I'm so impressed to see that many of you have already done that. And many of you are seeking internships. This resource packet that we're going to share out has a ton of opportunities for research internships, fellowships, things like that. So please take a look at the resource packet. And then finally, the third question, absolutely personal interest in the topic, access to a mentor and a community of peers. I agree. Those are all super important. So we hope you'll learn a little bit about all of those today. Okay. So there's one final thing that I'm going to request of our participants, and that is to take part in a chat storm. If you haven't done this before, I'm going to put a prompt up on the next slide, and it's going to ask you a question. And what I want everyone to do is type their response to the question in the chat, but you don't press enter yet. You just hold it in your chat box. So don't press enter. And then when I say, we'll all press enter at the same time, and the chat is going to get flooded with answers, and you'll see that you're a part of a much bigger community. So the question I'm asking is, on your path to pursuing mission science or planetary science careers, what is an obstacle that you're facing? So it doesn't have to be a long answer, but just take a second, think about challenges you're encountering, type it into the chat, but don't press enter. I'll tell you when to enter it. Okay, so take a moment.
Grace, so some people are online saying that chat is disabled for them, or that they do not have those capabilities.
Oh no.
I'll see if I can fix that right now, okay?
I wonder if it's disabled for everyone. If that's weird. Okay, well, let's find out. So guys, if you were able to type something in the chat, let's enter it in 3, 2, 1. Enter it. And if nothing comes through the chat, then I will know it has been disabled somehow. Oh no. Okay. So I'm not sure how this happened. Chat is disabled. Okay. I'm so sorry, everyone. Okay, well, then we're just going to move past this. We're going to get the chat working. Thank you very much for letting us know in the Q&A. But think about this. Lots of people are encountering these challenges. That's okay. That's a challenge you're facing. Chat is disabled. Okay, well, we're going to get it fixed, and we will make sure that chat is turned on by the time we get to the Q&A. And Amy, thank you for letting me know. All right. Okay, so we're going to move on. And what I mentioned was that we have a resource packet. So this has been shared through the chat. It's available on the web page. It will also be linked in the YouTube recording video description. So this should be widely available. The link is also down at the bottom of this slide. But this resource packet is 20+ pages of internship, fellowship, scholarship, citizen science, like all kinds of opportunities to get involved. And this is not all inclusive. I'm still learning about things that we're going to include in this packet. And so this is just a place to start. But the way that this reads is each of these sections, the title of the program is at the top. The organization that runs the program is at the top left. The general focus of the program is at the top right. And then there's a description, who is encouraged to apply, and when the general deadlines for applications are. And then you can learn more at each of these links. So when you have questions about, what are opportunities for high school students or postdocs, you can go to this document and at least get some ideas of a place to begin. You can do the search document for keyword, high schooler or computer science, whatever it is you're looking for. So please check this out. Okay, now we're going to go into our awesome panel, and we're going to meet who we have with us today. So first up, we have Dr. Amy Williams. Amy?
Hey, thanks so much, Grace, and thanks everyone for calling in. It is just an absolute delight to be online and be able to at least virtually meet so many people today. Happy to answer questions. So we've been asked to give just a brief introduction on who we are, what we're doing. And so I wanted to go through just the briefest of details on kind of how I got into this. And I think we'll have an opportunity to talk more about all of our paths into planetary science. So I'm an assistant professor at the University of Florida. I'm an astrobiologist and geobiologist. I currently work with both NASA's Curiosity and Perseverance rover missions. I have a QR code that links to my lab, the Life on the Edge lab, which we call the Latte Lab, because caffeine fuels our science. And I also have some contact information. I'm happy to be a resource for people who are just interested in learning more about planetary science and getting into it. So just a little bit about me. I actually didn't start out as a planetary scientist. I got my undergraduate degree from Furman University, which is a small liberal arts school in South Carolina, which is in the southeast of the US. And that degree was in earth and environmental science. And at the time, I was really interested in water quality and water chemistry. And so I went on to do a master's degree at the University of New Mexico, trying to speak, where I was able to pursue more of these interests in water quality and its impact on environment, humans' use, and the natural system. But while I was doing that, I realized I was really interested in how the microbial environment and the water chemistry and the mineralogy, how all of that comes together to influence how a system behaves, an entire ecosystem. And I was like, man, you know, this would be really cool if you could do this on other worlds. And it turns out you can. So actually between my master's and PhD, I switched over from very terrestrial water chemistry research to looking at astrobiology. That was my opportunity to join the Curiosity mission before it even launched as a graduate student. I did my PhD at the University of California, Davis. And from there, I was actually able to stay on the Curiosity mission after I graduated and started a postdoctoral position at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center. So I stayed with the mission through that. I became a professor at Towson University, which is north of Baltimore, Maryland, which is in the Northeast US, before moving to the University of Florida, where I am now. And along this entire path, I've been able to stay with the Curiosity mission, contribute to the SAM instrument team, which is the team I still work with. And just a few years ago, I submitted a grant through NASA to join the Perseverance rover mission as a participating scientist, and that was selected. So I currently work on both Curiosity and Perseverance. I'm a participating scientist through NASA grants on both of them right now. So like I said, with Curiosity, I work with the SAM instrument to look for organic molecules on the surface of Mars and understand how, where they come from. Can we say if they are made by life or if they're made abiotically without life, which is how organic molecules are also made. And then on the Perseverance mission, I'm actually one of the campaign leads for the Delta Front campaign. So we're currently exploring the front of Jezero Delta and collecting samples that are slated for eventual return to Earth with Mars sample return. So starting out from a small liberal arts undergraduate program in South Carolina to working on the two active Mars rover missions. It feels like a big leap when I think about it from start to finish, but everything is just these incremental steps, and I had great mentors along the way to help me. So hopefully this webinar is one of those steps for you all online to get some resources and learn more about planetary science. So Grace, with that, I'm happy to pass it on to others.
Thank you so much, Amy. All right, so next up, we have Dr. Nick Schneider.
Hi, everybody. Happy to be here and looking forward to the Q&A sessions. I'm a faculty member at University of Colorado. My lab does a lot of space missions, Laboratory for Atmospheric and Space Physics. That's the MAVEN spacecraft on the left, which has been orbiting Mars since 2014. And I lead the team that uses the imaging ultraviolet spectrograph. MAVEN was sent to Mars to understand why it lost its atmosphere, how it did, and spoiler alert, the atmosphere we've shown mostly escaped away to space, which was a controversial idea when first suggested, but is really being nailed down by our results. I'm also a teaching professor here. I'm really excited about education and outreach. And I'm also a textbook author, did the planetary science section in Cosmic Perspective, which some of you might come across. And the picture of me there at the lower right, you might recognize that's a trebuchet, like a catapult, but even better, that was my pandemic project. And so made good use of that time. I think I'll tell the rest of my backstory later on when we circle back. I'm going to put my contact info in the chat box.
All right, thank you so much, Nick. I'm going to have to learn more about what you launched from that trebuchet. Oh, all right, next up. Oh, there we go. So next up, we have Dr. Bruce Bannard.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bruce Bannard. I'm the principal investigator on the InSight mission. That's probably the one thing that actually makes me interesting. I've been at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Actually, that's a mistype. I actually only been there 45 years, which is still just about forever. While I was at JPL, I started out as pretty much a door closed, hunch over your computer kind of scientist, but more by hook or by crook or by luck, I started getting involved in missions. I worked on the Magellan mission as a participating scientist. I worked on Mars Observer and its follow-on Mars Global Surveyor as something called an experiment rep, which was sort of the liaison between the instrument and the project, which gave me a lot of sort of kind of mailroom level experience on how missions work. I got involved in trying to get seismometers on Mars, had a day job as the project scientist on the Mars exploration rovers, and finally got a proposal selected by NASA to go to Mars with seismometers, heat flow probes, and atmospheric sensors. That's what I'm still doing today, keeping a lander happy on Mars while it sends us data. I've only ever had one job in my life, which is at JPL, so I might not be the best example to follow, but we can talk about that more later on.
Thank you so much, Bruce. And yeah, 45 rounds up to 50, so you're there. All right, and then finally, we are very fortunate to be joined by Dr. Patrick Gazda.
Hi, I'm Patrick Gazda. I'm a scientist at the Los Alamos National Laboratory in this group called the Space Remote Sensing and Data Science. I am on both the ChemCam and SuperCam team as a collaborator, so that's why I included both of the rover masts on the slide. And I do various things on both missions, like mainly aqueous geochemistry, aqueous alteration, spectroscopy, calibration of those instruments, and astrobiology. And yeah, so my background maybe isn't very long, I guess, because I got my chemistry degree in 2007 and geology PhD in 2014. So I joined the lab as a postdoc in 2015 and stayed on its staff. So that's my story.
Awesome. And
I'm gonna add my email to the chat so you guys will have it.
oh, thank you. Oh, there's a question from Amy that's, well, we'll answer it while we've got this this picture up. Patrick, can you tell the difference between the rover masts without the geologic background?
Oh yeah, because the one on the right is Perseverance, because the different nav cams are in color and they have the different sort of look to them. Also, you have to look very carefully, but you can see the periscope on SuperCam for the green laser, so it looks a little different.
Yeah, sure.
I think that shows how close you are to these instruments. You're like, oh yeah, they're completely different. To me, I'm like, those look the same. All right, and Patrick, you also have a little bit of information to share with us about opportunities at Los Alamos.
Right. So I wanted to share especially that Los Alamos National Laboratory also has a lot of opportunities for students, even though it's not, planetary centric. We do hire students and postdocs from, high school level, if you are local to New Mexico, all the way through, undergrad, grad, postdocs. You can work for us during the summertime, all the way up to a year. You can work at your home institution, but still work with us for your semesters or et cetera. And so there's some links here to the different places. Although I definitely encourage that if you're interested in doing scientific collaboration with us, you can just drop me an email and we can talk about it. And we hire people in all sorts of fields, including engineers. So I noticed that maybe there was a question about whether engineering students can get into planetary science. And yes, because at Los Alamos, we built the ChemCam and SuperCam instrument, and we need engineers to do those designs and the building and everything. So, if you're interested, you can email me, you can go to those links and check it out. So thanks.
Fantastic. And yeah, we wanted to highlight these resources because these were some that I was not aware of. And so they're not currently in the resource packet. So that's what I mean. The resource packet doesn't contain everything. You shouldn't stop there. Keep looking beyond what's in there and we'll get these added. But for now, you can go check out the Los Alamos website. There's lots of opportunities to get involved for students and scientists of different levels. Okay, so at this point, we are going to move into the Q&A section of this program. So I encourage each of you participants to please get your questions into the Q&A and we will work our way through them. You can also, of course, participate through chat. It's just a little bit easier for us to keep track of your questions in the Q&A. And reminder, there's that voting feature. But so first off, I'm going to pose a question to our panelists and we'll work our way around. But the first thing I want to do to kick off discussion is to ask each of you, what brought you to this field? How did you come to be at the position where you are now? And how did you get on your first mission? And so I'm actually going to start with Nick, if you don't mind, to take us away.
Sure. I'm happy to think through the weird path that got me here. And I think no two paths will be alike. I know that many of us were attracted by what was going on in the space program, and that was certainly true for me. And I was just endlessly curious, not just about space, but a lot of science and nature things when I was growing up. But the space program really got me energized. And I said, if I could just be a janitor for NASA, then I can be part of this. And the university has me emptying my own trash nowadays, so I'm living the dream. But it's really true that just for me to carry any role in the exploration of space, I think is contributing to one of the biggest things that our time in history will be remembered for. So in high school, I learned computers pretty early. I took a lot of science classes. And in college, I got into astronomy and started using telescopes a lot. And I continued that in graduate school. And the thing that's really great about working in ground-based astronomy is that when your instrument doesn't work, you can take it apart and mess with things and put it back together. And you can say, I'm going to come back next month and it'll be better still. And so that was really a formative training for me to work with equipment, to understand how a telescope or a spectrograph works, such that I could envision the next best thing. in graduate school and later in my faculty position, I've skirted this boundary between engineering and science, and it's really been valuable to be aware in both disciplines. I'm not a hardcore engineer. I didn't touch any part of the instrument, and they wouldn't let me touch any part of the instrument, but understanding how to set the specifications so that you can accomplish your science goals and translate the needs of the scientists to the capabilities of the engineers has been really valuable. One of the things I wanted to answer Grace's question to the panelists is, what obstacles have you overcome? I had a 10-year obstacle in getting on the mission that really had my passion. I was proposing a mission to study the Jupiter Io system. And time again, we'd get to the phase A study and just not get selected and not get selected. And at the last one, I sort of threw up my hands and said, well, how am I gonna get into this game? And then I had an invitation to join the MAVEN team and to lead the instrument effort for the ultraviolet spectrograph, because I had all this familiarity from the ground-based observing and working with observations to really know what's necessary to answer the science questions. And I have to say, it was because that I had failed in those earlier proposals that I was available to work on the MAVEN mission, which is the most scientific fun I've ever had in my life. So I sort of think of all those proposals that weren't selected as practice for the ones that will get selected. And in my case, it took a decade, and I hope it doesn't for you.
That's a really wonderful lesson. Yeah, one door closes, or maybe many close, and another opens. That's awesome. Let's see, next on my screen, Amy, do you want to tell us a little bit about your path and how you got started?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know I spoke just a little bit about this in my intro, that I didn't start out doing planetary. Certainly I've always, I think one of my earliest memories is, watching a meteor shower with my parents and looking at the sky and thinking, there's got to be another little something out there, looking out into the stars, wondering if there's anyone else out there the same way I'm wondering about them. And so I know this has been a motivation for me my entire life. So, I knew I was interested in STEM fields. I knew I wanted to be a scientist, especially in high school. And so there was actually a question in the chat that Hannah asked about high school students wanting to do astrogeology. Number one, I had no idea astrogeology was an option. I didn't even know geology was an option. And I am a geologist. My PhD is in geology. And so, yeah, it's been a meandering path of pursuing opportunities, not necessarily waiting for opportunities to land in your lap. Like sometimes you have to chase things down, but also, sometimes you just have to say yes to something that, might sound like the greatest challenge you've ever, professional challenge you've ever faced. So moving from my home state in South Carolina and starting my master's in New Mexico, for those who aren't familiar with kind of the continental US, they're pretty far apart. And this was a huge jump for me. And I was, personally just terrified of leaving behind everything I was familiar with. And I really think that that was one of the biggest launching points for my career, because I realized I could do this, I could step outside of my comfort zone, and I could accomplish things. So pursuing those, just those interests and looking for new opportunities, I think is part of what helped me get to where I am now. And then, like I said earlier, getting into, realizing over the course of my master's degree, there's planetary science, there is astrogeology, there are all of these fields that I just really didn't know anything about, and became more and more interested in it, and then decided, I'm going to change up what I'm doing in my graduate career, and I'm going to go into, astrobiology. And so I've just taken so many courses that span the whole range, at least in my fields. I've taken a lot of chemistry, biology, and microbiology, as well as geology. So I feel like I have a really broad base to do planetary science with, because it really is multidisciplinary. So yeah, just and in my case, getting onto the Curiosity mission was a matter of joining an advisor at a graduate program who could take a graduate student onto the mission. I know for many people that is the path, and for many other people that's not really an option. And so that's why I think it's really great that Grace has been able to share these resources, because there are many paths into mission science. So even if like the one that you wanted to get into, like for example, graduate school or undergraduate research or something, even if that hasn't panned out, don't let that slow you down. Keep reaching for those additional opportunities, and just ask everyone you can. Are you taking on grad students? Do you need some assistance with this? Can I get an experience in this opportunity? Because at some point you'll have that breakthrough moment, and you'll be able to start pursuing that career that you're so interested in.
Thank you, Amy. And I'm going to circle back to some of those points. But for now, I'd like to hear from Patrick about your path, how you got started in the field and on these missions.
Yeah, so actually kind of started out really early. When I was a young kid in elementary school, I went to an outreach event for the Hubble Space Telescope because Shoemaker-Levy had hit Jupiter, and they did this big outreach event for it. And I happened to be local to Maryland, so I could go. And I thought that was just the coolest thing to see all these like planets like up close in the telescope and everything. But that got me interested in science, and I ended up going to this small liberal arts college, like Amy did, in Pennsylvania, and studied chemistry. They didn't even have a geology department, so I didn't really know much about what I was doing at that point. At least I wasn't really thinking about this trajectory at that point. But I got this chemistry degree. I went into industry for a while, and I was an amateur astronomer for a while, and I just thought, can I do this for real? So I ended up researching a lot of programs, and I joined University of Hawaii, again, originally for chemistry. But I got this opportunity to take a class that was on the moon and rocks and stuff. And I thought maybe that's more like what I wanted to do. And so I ended up switching kind of after the first year and a half into a geology program, doing spectroscopy, which is close to chemistry, and learning all about different spectroscopy techniques, which turns out that we all use on these missions, right? To study the geology. And then again, another opportunity came up close to the end of grad school, where Los Alamos, which is where the PI, Roger Weems, for ChemCam was at the time, and they're like, we're looking for a postdoc. I'm like, great, I'm looking for a job. So that's how I got onto the MSL mission as a postdoc originally. And then somebody asked in the Q&A about this, is like, how often do people convert to staff? And it happens pretty often at a lab if there's good amounts of funding and you apply for your own funding, et cetera. Yeah, I just converted a staff member in 2018 and stayed on, and also joined the SuperCam team as that all happened recently. So that's my whole journey.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I love that. Yeah, you're looking for a postdoc. I'm looking for a job. It's a match. Yeah, sometimes it's just about being in the right place at the right time. All right, Bruce, last but not least, will you tell us how you got started?
Sure. I mean, a lot of these journeys sound a little bit familiar. I mean, I was, super interested in space when I was in kindergarten, 5 years old. That's when the first astronauts were being shot off into space. That's how far I go back. And so I wanted to be an astronaut when I was, a really young kid. By the time I got into high school, I was, more jaded and realized that it was impossible for some kid from a small town in the desert to ever do anything, really cool like that. So I set my sights much lower. When I went to college, I thought, well, engineering sounds like a cool thing to do. So I thought I'd be an engineer, and I started taking engineering classes, and I found that I really liked the science classes a lot better than the engineering classes. So I changed my major to physics, which I started off failing, but eventually got through. And I took a geophysics course sort of as a optional class into my junior year, and thought, oh, this sounds like fun. You can combine, physics, which I like, with camping because you're doing geology, which turns out it doesn't work that way, but that's what I thought. So I went to graduate school as a geophysicist. I figured, I would, be able to figure out what's going on deep beneath the surface. I was really interested in things that you can't see, interested in the core of the earth and in the mantle of the earth, and figuring out stuff that can't be seen. And by chance, my office mate, when I went to grad school at Penn State, my office mate had just finished working for a year at Caltech after he finished his undergraduate career. And he says, hey, I know somebody at JPL is looking for a summer intern. Why don't you apply for the job? And so I got a summer internship at JPL, which is the center of the universe for planetary missions. So I went back to California for the summer. I worked my tail off there. They hired me again the next year. And I actually moved back to California to go to school, to graduate school after that, so I could be close to JPL and keep working there as a sort of part-time graduate student employee. And finally, I got a postdoc there when I finished my PhD, and got converted over to a staff scientist when I finished my postdoc. So like I said, JPL is the only real job I ever had, except for working in the tire shop back home. So I don't have a lot of experience in job interviews, but I do have a lot of experience in having lucky breaks. It's kind of amazing that I ended up at JPL. I did pretty much basic research type science for about 10 years. And then somebody called me up and says, hey, we're looking for somebody who knows something about, physics to, work on this instrument on Mars Observer, this altimeter instrument. I said, oh, that sounds cool. I could use that kind of data too in my research. So I started, working and learning a lot about engineering of missions, about design of instruments, about how missions are run. I got more and more into that. Then somebody else called me and says, hey, I've got this really cool idea for making a seismometer that could go on spaceships and be landed on other planets. I said, that would be really great. I always wanted to figure out, how thick the crust of Mars is, because I've been doing this research project which needs to have the crustal thickness of Mars, and we just have to make guesses. So once I stepped down that path, my science career kind of went down, 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 and my mission career kind of went up, up, up. And I started putting in proposals. Nick said he had a bunch of failures. I'll put my, 8 mission proposal failures up against anybody. I failed at so many proposals. My standard joke was, if you write enough proposals that fail, you'll run out of ways to get rejected, and what's only one that's left is actually a successful proposal. And I finally had a successful proposal about 10 years ago now with InSight. And so I've been spending the last 10 years both planning, designing, building, and now operating the InSight lander that's on Mars, taking seismology measurements. So probably my best advice to people is to be lucky, because I feel like I was lucky every step of the way. I was lucky to be born a white male in the United States. I mean, that takes a lot of hurdles out of the way right away, and I hope that we can take some of those barriers down, but there's still a lot of barriers left. I was just I feel like I was in the right place at the right time, but I do have to admit I did study hard. I did sort of devote most of my life to trying to understand how things work, and both in terms of science, in terms of engineering and mechanical things. And that came in very, very handy when it came time for people to look for someone to do these kinds of things. My other piece of advice is to attach yourself to a really interesting problem, because an interesting problem can take you a lot farther than maybe just hard work and intelligence can take you. People are always trying to get interesting problems solved, and if you're attached to it, you can ride the coattails of that problem pretty far.
Thank you, Bruce. And yeah, I mean, you said 8 proposals?
8 mission proposals, yeah. And that doesn't even count the instrument proposals that got shot down.
Yeah, that's tough. And we've got such great representation from Mars scientists here, but I have gotten to hear a little bit about the excitement at the LPI, because we have scientists that are finally getting missions accepted for Venus. And they're like, finally, we're moving past Mars. We're going back to Venus. They've been trying to get there for decades.
Venus rocks, I got to say. As a Mars scientist, Venus rocks.
Venus is very cool. I'm very excited for the new missions. But
Seismometer
Mars is
for
very
Venus.
cool too. What was that?
Just saying, what we really needed at Venus is seismometers. Good luck with that.
Yeah, some melt-proof ones, right? Okay, so at this point, we're gonna start taking audience questions, and y'all have put in some great ones already. Thank you, and our panelists have already started to answer some of them. I'm actually going to take one of the answered ones that came from Claire, and Amy gave a great response, but this one had so many upvotes. So Claire asked, what options are there for students who want to do research for a career, but not as a professor or in academia? And how do you get involved in these missions, or these opportunities? And so for maybe for Patrick or Bruce, who are not in a university setting, can you tell us a little bit about what is it like to do research outside of academia?
Well, it has its own challenges. The working at JPL, you're sort of an entrepreneur, and you can get somebody else to answer a question while I take care of the dog here.
Sure thing. You look after the pup. Patrick?
Sure, I can say a couple of things. So yeah, it's a little bit different. I mean, I never went into academia, of course, so I don't have the teaching responsibilities, but for sure there's you'll have to go find your own funding, and a lot of times, like, it's nice that I'm on a mission, because that is a lot of funding. But then if you're like, I need to take care of another quarter of my salary by doing other projects, you have to submit proposals to do that, or team up with other people. It's not that hard to do in government, because there's a lot of stuff to do in the government field, but they're not always going to be planetary, so you have to be sort of flexible in that. Say, oh well, I mean, like, Patrick, you know a lot about spectroscopy, or a lot about data manipulation. Why don't you work on this other project? I'm like, okay. And that can always open up new opportunities for like new scientific ideas. So it's kind of nice to have that flexibility. And then the other thing that's nice about, at least LANL, but I'm sure it also works in the NASA centers, is that I can still have students that I mentor. So I mentor some 10 students at all levels and postdocs. So, if that still interests you, you can still have a team of like students and other scientists working for you, and get a lot of really cool stuff done. So.
Yeah, there are scientists who basically work independently. There are companies that act as kind of umbrellas, like Planetary Science Institute, where you have scientists who don't really have an institutional framework around them. That gives you a lot of freedom, but it also puts the onus of responsibility on you to completely fund yourself with proposals. Proposals are sort of the lifeblood of doing research, and it's very competitive. People can support themselves completely on proposals, but it's very difficult to do. If you work at a place like LANL or JPL, you have a little bit more of a support system. As you said, you get people kind of throwing jobs your way if you have the right expertise, and so you can find things to do if the things that you want to do aren't available. And then if you work at a university, there's even a little bit more of a support system, but then there's also other responsibilities in terms of teaching and so forth. So there's lots of different kind of ways to go at it besides just an academic situation, but there are pros and cons to all the different ways of doing it.
I'd like to interject just to point out that what you're hearing from here, this group of panelists tends to be the proposal writing, team leading bunch of scientists, but we all are sort of in front of other teams of the people who don't have to write the proposals because we did. And the number of people doing the data analysis, the mission planning, things like that. I think there are more people like that than people leading these proposals. And there's also a misconception that only people with PhDs get to have the excitement of doing mission science. And that's not true either. There are people with bachelor's degrees deeply embedded in missions with fulfilling long-term careers. So this is called observational bias based on the people that are sitting in front of you, but those other opportunities are abundant.
Great point.
These opportunities, they're primarily through contractors with NASA, is that right?
Well, I saw everybody nodding, and there may be many different cases, but even on my team, the number of people that we hired, bachelor's degrees doing independent analysis under our supervision. It's a question of whether you have the burning desire to write the proposals, to ask the questions, or you just want to support the people and be part of that team that's answering the question. So I think that it's at national labs, it's at in the mission teams, it's in all those opportunities.
I'm trying to think if we were to, what are some of the main NASA contractors if people were looking for opportunities in some of these other career sectors? I'm aware of Jacobs Engineering is a really big contractor with NASA here in Houston.
I think USRA at least used to be. I believe that. I think that my affiliation as a contractor changed a couple of times when I was at Goddard, but I think that for a while that was one option as well. But often when you join, you join a project, and then it's basically like how the funding and the management side of things are worked. So, I mean, you're still doing the project. So I wasn't hired through USRA and then I got on the project. It was the other way around. So I think it can vary.
Yeah, it can definitely vary. But that's one way, especially for international applicants to find opportunities on these projects. It can be really difficult to be hired as a NASA employee, a federal employee with an international status, but as working in a private industry, as in you're employed by Jacobs or Lockheed Martin, but working on science missions, working in partnership with a NASA center or JPL. That's how a lot of these opportunities are available, is not through the research centers themselves, but with their partners and contractors. Okay, so I can put some of this stuff in the chat as well. Okay, well, thank you. So that's awesome. We're going to go to the next one. So this one is from an anonymous attendee, but they asked, what areas of planetary science do you see as needing the most growth in the coming years? So this is a real big picture question, but I'm very interested in the response to this one as well. So they also said, I hear a lot about lunar ISRU, for example. So I'll just quick, panelists, who wants to take this one?
I think I can say that
Bruce, take it away.
I can say with confidence that nobody on this panel knows where the high growth areas in planetary science are. And I can tell you the 45 years of my career, it can take some very sharp turns very quickly. I think the key thing in terms of where NASA is going is something called the Decadal Survey, and that is a document that's redone every decade, which tries to pull together all the top scientific questions, the most important scientific questions in planetary science. And all the other disciplines do it as well. There's one for astrophysics, there's one for heliophysics, but the Planetary Science Decadal Survey is a document that lays out what the field as a whole, sort of by consensus, believes are the most important science questions for the next decade. So if you want to get involved in something that's going to be happening in the next 10 or 15 years, I think that's the first place you want to go. Look at that document, see what kinds of scientific questions are being asked, what kinds of measurements are being sought, and what kinds of sort of straw man missions are being suggested. And if your interests align in some way in there, I think that's your best bet. Which of those things actually gets selected to have a mission supporting it? That is really sort of a turkey shoot. I mean, when I proposed InSight or InSight-like missions for 20 years, and it always seemed like it was going to be the next big thing. And for years and years and years, it just didn't quite make it. And then suddenly it was the next big thing. And so, planetary seismology, I thought that was, the coming thing back in 1990. And it was, 2012 before we actually, got selected. So I'm a bad predictor of what's going to be big next. But I've seen, other people, pick one right off the bat, their first proposal gets funded. Some people have done it my way. I really think that, understanding, what's in the Decadal Survey, understanding what the planetary science community believes the important questions are, and, using that to kind of focus your interest, focus your research, I think is probably the best odds that you're going to get.
And I can piggyback on that, what Bruce was saying, that the Decadal Planetary Science and Astrobiology Decadal Survey was just released earlier this year. I actually served on that, the entire survey for the last 2 years. So it was a relief to see it come out. But there's a lot of really fabulous, new directions that planetary science as a whole is going to be taking. You're getting a pretty heavy Mars cross section here with this particular panel, but I hate to admit it, but there are other destinations besides Mars. So there's a lot of really great science that's going to come out of what the Decadal Survey is basically promoting and recommending NASA focus on in the next 10 years. So yeah, especially for the questions that say in the next 5 to 10 years, it's actually mapped out. I mean, it's an 800-page document, but it is mapped out and it's publicly available. You can learn about whatever your planetary body of interest is. You can learn more about what's going to be happening in the next 10 years there.
I want to give a different perspective on how to make that next step. And building off of Bruce's advice to be lucky, luck favors the prepared. And so I think he and I have had the benefit of some career stability waiting for our big breaks, but each of those big breaks came about because of our backgrounds and our skill sets. And I've already described how mine was the ability to work with instrumentation, to understand it, to work with data, is to understand what the limits of data are, to write original code, to solve original problems, sort of no matter where you're plopped down. I think, so my advice is actually to work on your skill sets so that you look like the kind of people they need to carry out these missions. These patient people that have been proposing for decades, when they win, they got to go out and hire all kinds of people. there's a misconception, I think, that if you wanted to work in Mars atmosphere or any particular discipline, that you needed to come out of a program with a degree in that area or some expertise. And in truth, a lot of the people that are hired, certainly as graduate students, they didn't have that experience beforehand. As postdocs, they often don't have that experience. And there's just an awful lot of on-the-job training. And so my advice to you is, number one, work on the skill sets, whatever you find out that you like and that you're good at. Work on those skill sets, and then just go ahead and apply to almost regardless of, well, no, not regardless of whether or not you meet the qualifications, but apply to jobs where you don't have all of the qualifications. It turns out there's a segment of the population that Bruce has already alluded to that has always just applied whether or not they had the qualifications. And what do you know? It worked out surprisingly often. And everybody should be doing this because there's a good chance that the person with the ideal preparation they imagine doesn't apply or has 2 offers or something like that. And so I think you're much better to be prepared, and then the luck will come to you as long as you apply.
Yeah, can I follow on that, Patrick? I'm going to just keep cutting you off. I'm so sorry. I mean, so this is like part of how I got to like work with Patrick more so in our work together on Curiosity. So, you know, you are seeing a panel of white scientists on today, and you're not seeing all the different dimensions of diversity that are represented within planetary science. So yeah, definitely acknowledging that like my perspective and experience is going to be unique to many others. I'll also then say that, so I am an organic geochemist, right? And I look for organic carbon on Mars, and I did not do that prior to starting my postdoc. So my PhD experience was in the preservation of physical biosignatures within Mars analogous systems. And basically like knowing that I was going to move to the DC area as part of a dual career partnership, I knew that I was going to, I was looking for my next step. And not only was NASA Goddard in that area, but one of the instruments on board the Curiosity rover is run out of Goddard. And so it made the most sense for me from my career perspective that to attempt to get onto the SAM team as part of my postdoctoral research. And also I wanted to know more about sort of the other realms of biosignature detection. And so moving into organic geochemistry was the next logical step for my career. I was not qualified, other than having taken chemistry classes in undergrad. I was not, you know, probably the most qualified person to do this, but I wanted to learn to do organic geochemistry. I took a lot of classes. I did research. I published my research. So I tried to do, you know, the metrics that are required for us to demonstrate that we are able to learn how to be scientists and be independent scientists. And I think, I mean, it's totally anecdotal, but like that is part of what helped launch my career and getting these opportunities. So I do agree, yeah, with what Nick is saying. Like, don't, just because like you haven't checked every single box, don't let that limit you. Still be persistent, reach out to mentors, to advisors, to potential employers. You know, unfortunately that tenacity is required. I think it's just gotten more necessary in the last 10 years, but don't let yourself be held back by yourself. Push forward and push past those opportunities that, you know, all right, this one didn't pan out, that one didn't pan out. Eventually you're going to be PI on a mission that, you know, lands on Mars, right? Even though your other proposals didn't make it, you'll get there eventually. All right, sorry, Patrick, I won't interrupt you again.
Okay, yeah, I wanted to, I mean, I agree with what you just said there, Amy, and also what Nick was saying, but when you apply for a job, you know, it's really best to directly reach out to the person you want to work for and do your research ahead of time. Be like, you know, speaking as a scientist, it gets a lot of these emails. Like, I love to talk about my research, right? So be like, I read your paper about blah, 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 and I was interested in doing that kind of thing. Do you have any opportunities at where you work? Like, be direct about like, I'm looking for a job, and also engage in the science side. Like, make sure that you don't just send out like kind of form emails to literally everyone on the mailing list. Be like, that's the type of research that I do, and I really want to do. I want to work in this field. How do I do that? Like, ask people like me or the other people on this panel for advice. And then kind of going back to the other question, which was like, what fields are growing right now? I don't know really, but I'm going to give my biased opinion, which is that Planetary is always looking for new instrumentation. Like, that decadal survey is all about like, we want to send missions to XYZ planet, and then they say we want to make these measurements. So if you have new ideas about the new types of instruments that could actually do those measurements, or taking existing measurements like in a new way, or existing instruments and making them smaller, or like even like autonomous missions and like that kind of thing. These are things that NASA is always going to need. So if your field is just working on like a particular type of instrument, whether it's on the design side or the science side, it's very competitive, but you can continue to submit proposals or just work in those fields, and people will recognize that's like, okay, when one of us goes and says, I want to send a mission to Venus and I need a person that does Raman spectroscopy, they're going to look through the papers and be like, okay, these are the people who are experts in these fields, in these instruments, and you're going to get, people talking to you. So that's how that works.
So that's a great kind of segue into one of the other things I wanted to bring up. A lot of people in the registration noted that one of the challenges that they face is networking, both because it's difficult to do, to put yourself out there, and they're not sure where you network, if you're at a small university or maybe in an area where there isn't a highly developed space industry. So as planetary scientists, what are the societies that you're a part of? What are the meetings that you attend? And Patrick kind of already alluded to this, but is it ever a frustration, right, to be approached by a student or scientist who wants to learn about opportunities? Is it encouraged for people to reach out, to send emails, to kind of do the cold call of checking in with people? So Amy, I see you nodding. Will you let me know what you think?
Yes, so this, as one of the undergraduate coordinators for my department, this is one of the things that I try to help our undergraduates who are interested in applying to graduate school kind of navigate these waters. So you do want to reach out to people who are doing the research you're interested in, where you think you want your career to go. Like Patrick said, form emails, I get 100 emails a day and I track them, right? So it's like pretty average, like 90, 100 emails. That's a lot to get through. And so I'm definitely more likely to engage with an email and like basically to spend more time reading it. If it's like, hey, Dr. Williams, my name is so-and-so, and I read your paper on this. I'm really interested in graduate school. I have these classes that are relevant. Let me know that you didn't just find my name on the internet and you wanna do research, and this is how I can help you achieve that career goal. Because that, like investing my effort in working with a master's or a PhD student, those are years of your time and my time, and we want to make sure that we're both successful at the end of that path. So I would say reaching out to people specifically. If you're beyond graduate school, I think the same thing applies for postdoctoral work as well. Reaching out to a specific person, like that's how I started my process working at NASA Goddard, reaching out to the PI of the SAM instrument and saying, I'm moving, I got this experience and I want to learn more from you all, right? And that was the start of that conversation. So I think very much so, reach out to people, do your homework a little bit in advance so that you know what they're doing, you know how you might fit in with them. And even if that changes over the course of your time working with that mentor or with that institution, the fact is that you've spent the time figuring out where you think you fit, and then all of that can evolve once you're there and working.
And I agree with Amy's suggestion to go beyond the cold calling idea, to be informed about the people you're talking to. And this is especially important when you go to conferences. And a lot of people, most people have the ability to, well, I don't know, I shouldn't make generalizations here. Get yourself to a conference somehow. Many conferences also have reduced registration fees for students or for young scientists. Take advantage of all of those. Get yourself to a conference. I personally find in-person networking far more effective than anything you can do remotely. You can just have casual conversations in the poster room, but make a list before you go to the conference. 10, 20, 50 people that you're going to look for. Have something intelligent to say about each of their disciplines. And I think that's a form of networking that is particularly effective.
Thank you. Yes, I completely agree. Attending conferences is great. And Amy just put some information in the chat about the types of conferences that she's attending. These are going to vary depending on your discipline and your area, physical, geographical area, whether or not you're able to travel. But conferences are a great way to meet scientists in person and see the active research that's going on. Okay, so we have another question. We have a bunch of questions, and guys, we're not going to get through all of these. I'm so sorry, but we've got a couple more that I'm going to try to get to. I just lost the one I was looking at. Oh, okay. So I wanted to ask. This is probably, again, the answer is going to be a lot of questions or a lot of answers. But so Nick, you mentioned this, focus on the skills that you can bring to a project, the skills that make you an attractive candidate for a PI who's trying to build a team. So even if you're just speaking for yourself here, what do you mean by skills? What does that mean?
So I'm mainly talking about research skills. I look for students that have, and postdocs that have analyzed data. If they're farther along in the field, I look for whether or not they have published those results. People that can work with equipment or understand how equipment work are especially valuable when you're on an instrument team. Your instrument is out there in orbit and you need to know what its limits are, what's possible and not, how you should prioritize the extremely valuable use of that instrument time. And so those are the things that I look for in applicants, and you can get those either in undergraduate research. There are often classes called research methods, both the undergraduate and graduate level, or a summer REU program. Those are just really great ways to get the kinds of skills that I look for.
Thank you. And I have another question that sort of builds onto this. Asking from a computer scientist, what is the overlap? How often are you all as planetary scientists working with computer scientists?
Oh, all the time.
All the time?
4 of my students all working kind of computer science and different things. Like I have one person looking at database, management, because we have just reams of data, lab data, Mars data, image data. We also, need a lot of people who can just program so that we can input this data into big statistical models and things like that. And there's a lot of overlap between what computer scientists do and what we do. And in fact, you may learn some geology and then want to do like a sort of, or physics or whatever degree that sort of encompasses both, because programming is a big part of what we have to do.
Absolutely.
And then other skills I would say are like enthusiasm, like lots of enthusiasm for a job like this, teamwork, communication skills, being able to give a talk, but also write, decently. Now you're all students, so you're learning how to do that. But the willingness to do those things is a really big plus. But yeah, the team that we're on is there's 15 people at LANL, but then there's hundreds of people all over the world working on this. So teamwork is really important.
Thank you, Patrick. I think that's such an important thing to emphasize, that you need research skills as well as the soft skills, writing, communication, interpersonal skills, and that planetary science and especially missions are hugely multidisciplinary. And these are really big teams that bring together people of all different backgrounds and expertise. So whether you are, on the business side, accounting, finance, or you're a chemist, a scientist, there are huge opportunities to still take part in this really exciting work. Okay, does anyone have anything to add about skills? Otherwise, we're going to move on. Okay, I'll take that as no. So I'm looking for, so a bunch of these we have covered. Thank you, guys.
So I've seen a lot of questions about opportunities for people who are not in Europe or United States. How can they get involved in these space opportunities? And honestly, I think that is a huge problem. And frankly, with the missions that I've been involved in, we do have people. I have people on my team who are from Nigeria, who are from Morocco, from sub-Saharan Africa, from South America, certainly from Asia, South Asia, but almost, I think without exception, these are all people whose path to the mission was through a university or an institution in Europe or the United States, either going to graduate school or getting a job at a university in Europe or the United States. I don't think this is right, but as far as I can tell, that is the only practical route to get into these kinds of positions. And I would love to hear if anyone else on this panel has other ideas about how to do that. But that's the best advice that I have.
One thing I wonder about, Bruce.
Go ahead.
Is sorry, Nick. So like with our competed missions or anything where we have instruments competed, right? So we have on Perseverance and Curiosity, right? People working all over the world and instruments that are contributed. So those teams that are, so yes, many of them are, if it's not in the US, so much of it's in Europe, but that is a little bit, it's not like everyone has to move to the US to work with a US institution, right? As far as I understand, and that's where the expertise of folks who have done this longer than I have is so valuable. Do you think it's an option, just as valuable of an option for students to reach out to advisors who work on these instrument teams that are not located in the US, but they'll still get that opportunity to work with the missions? I guess just speaking to the point that you don't have to come to the US, but I do agree it is kind of limited in those pathways.
We do have really good collaborations with a lot of institutions, a lot of the countries in Europe. But if you're coming from South Asia, if you're coming from Africa, certainly India is building a very, very good planetary program there, and there's ways to get involved in space exploration in India. The Emirates has got a planetary mission. So there are space programs that are going on, so are outside the sort of the northern hemisphere and so forth. And I think for people in those areas, getting involved in that is a great pathway in. On Insight, I think 2/3 of our science team is actually in Europe and at European institutions, and so I'm very, very aware of the opportunities in Europe. But Europe and the United States is still a pretty limited patch of terrestrial terrain, and I'm hoping that in the future we can open up more opportunities for people outside that pretty exclusive club.
And I wanted to remind people that there's if you're in a place that doesn't have a space program, there are any number of technical fields that you can be earning degrees, advanced degrees in. And just about everybody does astronomy and astrophysics, just as an example. And I know that a lot of people are, they might set a goal of working with JAXA or ESA or NASA, but a lot of those people were trained outside the US in those other technical fields. And so I think there's a pathway if you do the best with the opportunities that are available to you before you make that transition.
Absolutely, and there are a lot of opportunities to pursue graduate degrees in these advanced fields in the US or in Europe, where then you can start to route into working on these missions and working with these organizations. And actually, Amy, you have a couple students, right, who are working with NASA as graduate students. Could you just briefly tell us a little bit about how that works, and if a student was looking for a similar type of opportunities, an incoming graduate student, how could they go about looking for someone like you who has those positions available?
Awesome. And so I'll definitely say right now, for all the emails I've already gotten this semester, that my lab group, I think 3 is the ideal number for me to mentor. And so as they graduate, I'll be taking on more students. I think getting a good mentoring situation is so important in graduate school. But this is the path I ended up taking, and now the path I'm offering to graduate students working with me. As a participating scientist on these 2 rover missions, I'm able to bring my students onto the missions where they can work with daily rover operations, they can propose experiments in line with the goals of the mission. And so effectively just having students reach out to me sort of in the way that we've discussed previously, here's what I want to work on, here's the path that I want to take and what I want to do with my career, getting folks into the graduate school in that way, and working with me in a graduate program, and then identifying, okay, what on the mission are you going to contribute to? What do you want to work on? And so that has been my personal experience, and now the experience that I share with my students, that they join me to do their graduate degrees, master's or PhD. If they want to work on the rover missions and we identify a project for them to work on, then they're on the mission. And I certainly recognize that there are a lot more hoops to jump through if someone is an international student versus being a US citizen. But that is one of the pathways that my 3 PhD students have taken to work on either Perseverance or Curiosity.
Thank you.
And
So I
drop
just
a link into the chat window, which is a resource that maybe it's in the already there. It's 85 graduate programs where you can get a PhD in planetary science. Not all as cool as what Amy's doing, but we can't all work for Amy.
And I haven't yet gotten actually the University of Florida on that list, because so my department is geology. It's not planetary science, but there's multiple planetary scientists at the University of Florida and even in my department. So just remember, planetary science is so diverse that we find ourselves housed within departments all over that aren't necessarily exactly planetary science.
Right, true. But universities don't have the same set of prohibitions, I'll say, on non-citizens that NASA centers do. And so don't be discouraged. I'd say the majority of those schools know how to handle foreign applicants and get you involved in a planetary PhD.
Yeah, and I'll just say, just to emphasize kind of the key word to look for if you were looking for a potential PhD advisor or postdoctoral advisor who is a scientist on a mission and might have funding and research opportunities for a student or postdoc. They're called participating scientists. Is that right?
No, there's a
Not
broader
always.
list of.
That's broader.
There's co-Is and there's collaborators. I'm a collaborator.
But see that, okay, so let's fill it
Being
in.
on the mission.
Yeah, if you're looking for people who might have student opportunities, who should you look for? What are they called?
Science team members.
Okay. Science team members. So I could Google, say, like Mars 2020 science team members, and I'd be able to find some folks who could have opportunities for me.
So there's a website that would have, yeah, like our basic information, like our names and where we are, and maybe it would have something about our research interests, but then yeah, the impetus would be on the student or postdoc to figure out what it is you do and if it would be a good fit after that. Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't think there's like a single clearinghouse for all of this information.
Yeah, each mission sort of
Not
has
yet.
their
Maybe
own
that's the
page
next
with
step for the LPI.
investigators.
What was that, Bruce?
Sorry.
I see. Each mission tends to have its own web page with, then there's usually a link to a list of the science team members. On Insight, we start out with about 20 co-investigators, and we expanded that by about another 25 or 30 participating scientists. But each of the co-Is and participating scientists brings collaborators to the mission as well, and they're not really listed anywhere. So you really have to kind of come to that through the activities of the co-investigators, the participating scientists. The other thing is that there are a lot of people doing planetary research at various universities and research centers who may not be on a science team, but are using the data that's coming down, and they're that close to being, as close as the science team members. They don't get to participate in operations and so forth, but they're still, using the data hot off the presses coming down from these various missions. And so, look at the research projects of the various different professors and researchers at these universities, and don't discriminate against people who don't happen to be on a science team right now. Some of them may have, an instrument proposal, in the works. Some of them may be, on the verge of becoming participating scientists on a mission. Some of them may have just spent 20 years working on missions. Those are still really, really interesting and valuable opportunities to take advantage of.
Absolutely. And I think that's where it comes back to. Networking is so valuable. If you can join online societies and networks, attend any conferences or workshops that you're able to, this is where you can hear about some of those folks that might not be listed on a science team, but who will have opportunities because they're building up research programs and things like that. So we have got just about 7 minutes left until the end of the hour. So at this point, I'm gonna close up our discussion. And I want to thank our amazing panel so much and our awesome participants. You guys had so many great questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to them all. We hope that this has been very helpful to you and that you will be able to find some resources in the packet or that was in the chat, and you can send some final questions to myself and we'll try to help you out too. So before you run off, we have a couple of quick poll questions for you. And then when you leave, there will be a survey and we would love your feedback. Okay, so.
And how about the panelists? We put our emails in the chat again as things wind down.
That would be amazing, yes. All right, so I just launched our evaluation polls. We have 3 of them here, and we would just like your feedback on what you found most useful, if you feel that you are more prepared, and if you feel that you are more knowledgeable. So just take a moment and fill these out. And then, like I said, there's a survey that will open up on your browser once you leave the webinar today, and any feedback you have would be much appreciated and might be shared with some of our awesome panelists. All right, so I'll leave this up and people can finish their polls if they are not done yet. But for now, please, everyone who's still here, I'd like to take the opportunity to say a big thank you to our amazing panel, Amy, Patrick, Nick, and Bruce. We're so pleased that you guys were able to join us for this. Your insights were so helpful. Thank
This
you
was fun.
guys.
A pleasure.
Thank you
It was
guys.
a joy. Thank you.
Yeah, thank
All
you
right,
so much.
well, panelists, if you're able to stick around for like 5 minutes after the end of the program, I just have a little bit of info for you. To all of our attendees, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your participation and your questions. And we will hopefully have some offerings for you guys soon in the career development space.